We all know that the criminal justice system tends to favor white people. But do we know how serious the problem really is? Well, let's check some stats researched by the NAACP to understand it. 65% of black adults have felt targeted because of their race. As for Latino and Asian adults, 35% of them have felt targeted because of race. 87% of black adults say the U.S. criminal justice system is more unjust towards black people. 61% of white adults agree. A black person is 5 times more likely to be stopped without just cause than a white person. On average, black Americans are exposed to 4 police killings of other unarmed black Americans in the same state each year. 1 out of every 3 black boys born today can expect to be sentenced to prison. For Latino boys it is 1 out of 6, and for white boys 1 out of 17. African American defendants are 22% more likely to have convictions involving police misconduct, which eventually result in exoneration. For the next stats, take into consideration that white people represent about 61% of the U.S. population, while black people 12.3% and Hispanics 18%. White people only make up about 41% of fatal police shootings. Black people make up 22% of fatal police shootings. African Americans and whites use drugs at similar rates, but the imprisonment rate of African Americans for drug charges is almost 6 times that of whites. 5% of illicit drug users are African American, yet African Americans represent 29% of those arrested and 33% of those incarcerated for drug offenses. About 56% of the U.S. incarcerated population are African Americans and Hispanics. African Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of whites. The imprisonment rate for African American women is 2 times that of white women. African American children represent 32% of children who are arrested, 42% of children who are detained, and 52% of children whose cases are judicially waived to criminal court. African American children represent 14% of the children population. If the African Americans and Hispanics had the same incarcerated rate as whites, the prison and jail populations would decrease about 40%. More than 1 out of every 6 black men who today should be between 25 and 54 years old have disappeared from daily life. Incarceration and early deaths are the main causes behind their absence. 35% of criminals executed by death penalty during the last 40 years were black. African Americans are pursued, convicted, and sent to death at a disproportionately higher rate than any other race. 66% of juveniles sentenced to death are people of color, and 2/3 of the crimes committed involved white victims.